The galaxy had been at peace for centuries. The wars that once raged between powerful alien species had faded into distant memories. The races of the stars had found a way to coexist, their empires stretching across vast regions of space. Most of them had lost interest in the distant corners of the universe. Life was calm, and the vast emptiness of deep space was often filled only with silence. But on one seemingly normal day, that silence was shattered. A distress signal, unlike any other, suddenly broke through the cosmic quiet. It was faint at first, a weak cry for help, but its origin was shocking. The message came from a forgotten corner of the galaxy, a place where no advanced civilization had ever set foot. It wasn't a part of the galaxy that was known for its thriving life forms or trade routes. No one expected anything to come from that distant area. And yet, this signal was different. It wasn't the usual call from a distressed planet or a helpless species. It felt more like a warning. The galaxy's greatest powers quickly took notice. The Zakiri, known throughout the galaxy as the most fearsome conquerors, were the first to react. They had crushed countless civilizations and expanded their empire to unimaginable lengths. But even they were uncertain. The message wasn't directed at any specific race, but it felt urgent. Whoever had sent it had known they were in danger and was now reaching out, hoping someone would listen. As the signal continued to pulse through space, the alien species who had once dominated the stars gathered in their council chambers. The message didn't seem to make sense, and that was exactly what worried them. Was it a trap? A ploy from some long-forgotten race that now sought to lure them into danger? Was it a trick meant to weaken them? The Zakiri were not known for their caution, but this was unlike anything they had ever faced before. The Galactic Council was divided. The warlords argued for immediate action, while others hesitated, fearing the unknown. The best minds of the galaxy could not decipher the full meaning of the signal. No one could make sense of its origin, or the plea it carried. And then there was Earth, a planet once forgotten by the galaxy, left to linger in isolation after a long period of exile. Its people had been thought weak, insignificant in the grand scheme of the galaxy. For centuries, no one had heard a word from them. The once proud humans had faded into the shadows of history. They were not seen as a threat to the galaxy's stability. But to the galaxy's shock, Earth was the first to respond. The Council, still debating the signal's meaning, was stunned when Earth's representatives issued a bold message of their own. They declared that they would respond to the call for help. It was an answer no one expected. Humanity, with its small fleets and outdated technology, would face whatever danger lay beyond the mysterious signal. The Council looked on in disbelief. How could the humans, who had long been regarded as insignificant, think they could help? The galaxy's leaders dismissed the humans' response as a futile attempt, convinced that Earth had nothing to offer. They believed it was a mistake for Earth to get involved. But the humans were undeterred. They were not naive, nor were they afraid. They had no idea what kind of danger awaited them, but one thing was clear: they had no choice but to act. The galaxy might not think them worthy of being listened to, but Earth had always known its potential. And now, they were determined to prove it. As Earth's fleet began its preparations, a strange feeling settled over the Council. The powerhouses of the galaxy, confident in their strength, hesitated. They could not help but wonder, was humanity truly as weak as they had believed? Could it be that Earth's people had something more powerful hidden away, something the galaxy had never considered? As the hours passed, and Earth's fleet prepared to make its journey, the Zakiri warlords gathered for a private council of their own. They, too, were puzzled. Despite their fearsome reputation, they had never encountered a force that simply did not fear them. What could possibly motivate these humans to take such a dangerous step? Was there something they knew that the rest of the galaxy didn't? It was a question that gnawed at them, but they were not about to let this strange turn of events shake their confidence. They would watch, and they would wait. But suspense hung heavy in the air, thick with questions and uncertainty. The mysterious distress signal had stirred something in the galaxy, something that could not be ignored. And at the center of it all stood Earth, a small, seemingly insignificant planet, once forgotten and now standing at the edge of something far greater than anyone had anticipated. As Earth's fleet moved towards the unknown, they were ready for whatever lay ahead, even if they had no idea what they would find. And all across the galaxy, the great powers watched, intrigued and wary. The mysterious call for help had sparked a chain of events no one could have predicted, and the outcome would change everything. The galaxy had never known humans as anything more than a fading memory, but now, humanity's response to the call would prove that even the smallest of forces can leave the greatest impact. And the stars, the very heart of the galaxy, waited for what would come next. The quiet hum of Earth's fleet filled the control rooms as preparations for the journey to answer the distress call moved into high gear. The fleet was small, nowhere near the size of the galactic empires that ruled the stars, but it was all humanity had. Ships of varying shapes and sizes, from ancient dreadnoughts to cutting-edge technology developed in secrecy, gathered at Earth's spaceport. The fleet was composed of both military and civilian vessels, for Earth had learned the hard way that survival was a collective effort. Each ship was equipped with weapons that had been upgraded over the years, but humanity's strength didn't lie in its firepower alone. It was the human spirit, ingenuity, and adaptability that set them apart. Earth had been left alone to fend for itself for centuries, and in that time, they had learned to rely on resourcefulness and a unique ability to face overwhelming odds. There was no fear in the hearts of those who volunteered for the mission. As the fleet launched into the cold void of space, Earth's leaders gathered for one final briefing. There was no clear understanding of what they would face, or even who had sent the call for help. The distress signal had been too vague, and the origins of the request seemed to come from a place no civilization had ever explored. But Earth was determined to answer. They had to. Their response wasn't just about answering a call. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity could be more than the world they had been forgotten as. The Council of Galactic Powers, including the Zekiri warlords, monitored Earth's movement closely. They couldn't help but feel intrigued, if not a little unsettled. The humans were embarking on a mission that could very well lead them to their deaths. Or worse, what if the humans had uncovered something that the galaxy's greatest powers had missed? What if they were about to uncover a force too powerful for even the Zekiri to conquer? It was the unknown that terrified the galaxy's powers the most. The signal hadn't provided much information, but there was one thing they did know. It had come from a place of darkness, a place that had been lost to time. No one knew if this was the last desperate plea of a dying civilization, or a trap designed to lure them all into a false sense of security. What was certain, however, was that the humans were the only ones with the courage to answer. As Earth's fleet ventured deeper into the uncharted reaches of space, the crew members struggled to contain their unease. They were entering unfamiliar territory, and there was no way to predict what awaited them. The very fact that the distress signal had originated from a forgotten part of the galaxy was enough to set off alarms in every captain's mind. Yet, despite the uncertainty, a sense of determination burned brightly among the humans. Commander Sarah Greaves stood on the bridge of the flagship Resolute, staring at the star-filled expanse ahead. Her crew was silent, the tension palpable. She had been chosen for this mission because of her experience in leading in extreme situations. Yet this was different. They weren't simply heading into hostile territory. They were walking into the unknown, hoping to find answers to a question that had yet to be asked. "What do you think we'll find, Commander?" Lieutenant Vance, the youngest officer on board, asked quietly. Greaves took a deep breath before replying, "I don't know, but that's why we're here. Someone needs to find out." Her words were heavy with both resolve and uncertainty. She knew they were entering a dangerous situation, but they had no choice. It wasn't just the fate of Earth that was at stake. It was the entire galaxy. If they didn't answer this call, no one else would. And no one else had the drive, the spirit, or the will to do what Earth was about to do. The fleet made its way deeper into the uncharted region of space. The mysterious distress signal had guided them this far, but now they had to rely on their own navigational skills to find the source. As the days turned into weeks, the crew's nerves began to fray. There was no sign of the danger that had been feared, no alien ships lurking in the void, waiting to strike. The silence of space had returned, and the signal had stopped. What had they gotten themselves into? Why had they been chosen to answer this call? The questions haunted every officer on every ship in the fleet. Some began to question the wisdom of their mission, but each time doubt crept in. They would think of Earth, their home, and they would press on. Commander Greaves knew the risks. She knew that they might be walking into a trap, that they might be taking humanity into the jaws of something far beyond their ability to understand. But there was no turning back now. They were committed, and as the fleet grew closer to the signal's origin, they would find out what was waiting for them, whether it was salvation or doom. The suspense was suffocating. Every minute seemed like an eternity as they approached the dark heart of the galaxy. The fleet grew smaller in the vastness of space, and the feeling of isolation intensified. There were no communications from the other galactic powers, no word from the Council, just the sound of the ship's engines humming through the silence of space. Suddenly, a ship on the outer edge of the fleet picked up something, a faint blip on their sensors. It was too weak to be a weapon or another ship, but it was something, and in this empty part of space, even the smallest sign was enough to stir excitement. "We found something," the communications officer on the Resolute called out, a sense of relief in his voice. Greaves stood at the command deck, watching the data stream in. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep the momentum going. The fleet had found something, but the mystery of what it was, or what was waiting for them, remained. The suspense was building, and the galaxy's greatest question now loomed over the humans. What was this place, and what dangers, if any, lay ahead? The answer was just beyond the horizon. The human fleet was nearing the source of the distress signal, but a sense of unease filled the ships as they ventured further into the heart of the galaxy's forgotten corners. What they had assumed would be an empty void was slowly revealing secrets that no one could have anticipated. The signal, once a faint whisper in the darkness, had now turned into an unmistakable beacon, a call that seemed to draw them deeper into an unknown abyss. On the bridge of the Resolute, Commander Greaves stared intently at the view screen. The stars seemed to stretch into infinity, but something was wrong. There was a distortion in the fabric of space itself, as if the very stars were being manipulated. Small anomalies began to appear on the sensors, blips that didn't make sense, gravitational shifts that shouldn't have been there. The fleet's course was disrupted, and the crew could feel it. It was as though an unseen force was pulling them in. "We're not alone," Greaves muttered under her breath, though she didn't say it aloud. She didn't need to. Every officer on board could sense it. There was something in the void, something ancient and powerful, watching them. Yet they had no idea what it was. The fleet's communication systems, once secure, began to malfunction sporadically. It was like a signal jammer, but no one was sure where it was coming from. The sense of isolation grew stronger with each passing moment, and the crew's anxiety built. Every second felt like they were being lured deeper into a trap. "Commander, we're picking up strange readings," reported Lieutenant Vance, his voice tense. "Nothing we've ever encountered before." "What do you mean by strange?" Greaves asked, her eyes narrowing as she looked at the data. "Gravitational anomalies, energy signatures. It's like the fabric of space is warping. The signal is getting stronger, but it's also distorting our sensors. Something is controlling the area around us." "Could it be some sort of weapon?" Greaves asked, feeling a knot form in her stomach. She knew the galaxy wasn't short of terrifying technologies. But this was different. The readings didn't match anything in their databases. "We don't know yet," Vance answered, his hands dancing over the control panel. "It's like we're being pulled in, Commander. If we don't adjust our course, We might be too late to get back out. Greaves stood still for a moment, considering their options. Every instinct told her that turning back now would be foolish, but the unknown stretched before them like a vast and empty chasm, ready to swallow them whole. The fleet was at the mercy of something they couldn't even see, let alone fight. She knew they had no choice but to push forward. They were close, closer than they'd ever been. But the question remained, what awaited them at the source of the signal? "We keep moving forward," she said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty. "This is why we came. We're here to find answers." As the fleet adjusted its course, the unseen force continued to tug at them. The quiet hum of their engines, once a steady companion in the emptiness of space, now sounded alien, as if it too was being warped by the strange forces at play. The silence of deep space was deafening, interrupted only by the occasional report from the crew, each one more uncertain than the last. Then, just as the tension reached its peak, the fleet finally arrived. A massive object appeared in front of them, floating in the center of a vast, empty expanse. It was a structure so large it defied comprehension. Its surface was smooth and metallic, unlike anything the humans had ever seen. The object seemed to pulse with an eerie, unnatural glow, a faint hum radiating from it. The ship's sensors finally locked onto it, though they still couldn't determine what it was made of or how it functioned. "This is it," Greaves whispered under her breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. This was what they had been searching for. The source of the distress call. But what was it, and why had it called to them? Her eyes scanned the massive structure, her mind racing with possibilities. There was no sign of life, no movement. It was an enigma, a piece of technology or architecture unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Prepare for landing," Greaves ordered, though her words felt hollow. How could they prepare for something they didn't understand? The ship's crew scrambled to make final adjustments, their hands moving over controls, unsure of what was coming next. Every instinct told them that they were walking into something far beyond their understanding. As the Resolute and the other ships moved closer, the object seemed to shift, as if it was alive. The glow intensified, and the hum grew louder. The crew exchanged nervous glances, wondering what would happen next. There were no more answers, only questions, and the fear of the unknown pressing in on them. "We're being pulled in," Vance said, his voice tight with fear. "Something's happening to our systems. We can't control our descent." The crew held their breath as the ship's descent slowed to an almost unnatural pace. The Resolute drifted towards the surface of the massive structure, now helpless in the grip of whatever force controlled it. Greaves clenched her fists, but there was nothing more they could do. This was it, the moment they had all feared, the moment when humanity would confront something far beyond their understanding. The ship came to a gentle stop, and the crew waited in eerie silence, eyes fixed on the strange surface before them. There was no going back now. The answers were waiting inside, but so too were the dangers that lay in the heart of this uncharted place. "Get ready," Greaves said softly, more to herself than anyone else. "We've come too far to turn back now." As the crew prepared to step into the unknown, the mysterious force that had drawn them here seemed to hold its breath, waiting for humanity to make its next move. The crew of the Resolute disembarked into the eerie stillness of the massive structure, the air heavy with a sense of both awe and foreboding. The metallic walls were smooth and seamless, as if forged from a single uninterrupted piece of material. They had landed on a platform, its surface pulsing with a faint rhythmic light, as if the structure itself were alive, breathing in sync with their every movement. Commander Greaves led her team, her steps cautious but resolute. The entire crew felt the weight of history on their shoulders, but there was no turning back now. Their mission, their purpose, had been set long before they'd answered the distress call, and now they were standing at the threshold of something that could change the fate of the galaxy. "This place is ancient," Greaves muttered under her breath. The architecture, though clearly advanced, was beyond human understanding, older than anything known to the galaxy's most advanced species. There was no sign of any life. No crew, no inhabitants, but there was an undeniable feeling that they were not alone. The air was thick with energy, humming with something powerful, something dangerous. It was not the type of energy they were used to in the depths of space, but a force older, deeper, and far more ancient. Lieutenant Vance, who had always been skeptical of the mission, spoke up, his voice filled with apprehension. "Commander, do you feel that? The air, it's like we're standing on the edge of something. Something huge." Greaves didn't respond immediately. She was focused on the strange symbol carved into the wall of the entryway, a symbol that seemed to glow faintly as she approached. It was alien, unmistakably so, but there was something oddly familiar about it. The pattern seemed to shift in her mind, like a dream that was just out of reach. "We need to move carefully," Greaves finally said, turning to the rest of her team. "We're walking into unknown territory, and we don't know what we'll find." The crew nodded, silently agreeing, as they slowly moved forward. They passed through archways that seemed to bend space around them, creating a feeling of vertigo that made the world outside seem distant, as if reality itself was changing with every step they took. As they ventured deeper into the heart of the structure, the lights flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to dance on the walls. The deeper they went, the heavier the air became. It felt almost as if the structure was watching them, aware of their every movement. But there was no time to consider the unnerving presence. They had a mission, and they had to stay focused. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the crackle of static, the very same signal that had drawn them here in the first place. It wasn't coming from any of their equipment, though. It came from the walls themselves, as if the building was communicating directly with them. "Commander, I'm getting something," Lieutenant Vance said, his eyes wide as his hand hovered over his communication device. "It's the signal, but it's different. There's a message embedded in it, something we can't decipher." Greaves felt her heart race. They had thought the signal was simply a distress call, but now it seemed to be more than that. A message, and not one they could easily understand. The implications were staggering. The crew moved cautiously forward, their path taking them deeper into the structure. Soon, they found themselves standing in a massive chamber, its high ceiling disappearing into darkness. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, a simple, unadorned stone block, but upon it rested a strange artifact, a glowing orb that pulsed with a rhythmic light. Without a word, Greaves approached the pedestal, her breath catching in her throat as she gazed at the orb. It was the source of the signal. She could feel it, deep within her bones. It was alive, somehow. Not in the biological sense, but in the way it seemed to resonate with the very essence of the structure. "What is it?" Lieutenant Vance whispered, unable to look away from the orb. Greaves didn't answer immediately. Her mind was racing, trying to connect the dots, but the answers remained elusive. She reached out and placed her hand gently on the orb. The moment her fingers touched its surface, a shockwave of energy coursed through her, causing her to stumble back, gasping for air. The orb's light intensified, and the walls around them began to vibrate, the ground trembling beneath their feet. The crew's instruments went haywire, flashing warning signs of power surges and energy fluctuations. Suddenly, the entire structure seemed to come alive. The lights in the chamber flickered wildly, and the hum of energy grew louder, almost deafening. It felt like the entire room was closing in on them, as if the building itself was reacting to their presence. Then, with a loud crack, the orb split open, revealing a swirling vortex of light and energy at its core. The crew took a step back, their fear palpable. The air was thick with a strange energy, a force that seemed to warp reality itself. "Get back," Greaves shouted. "Everyone, get back." But it was too late. The vortex expanded rapidly, consuming everything in its path, including the very fabric of space around them. The crew tried to retreat, but the force of the vortex was too strong. It was like being pulled into a hurricane, with no way to escape. The last thing Greaves saw before everything was consumed by the swirling vortex was the orb, its light shining brighter than ever, as if it were calling to them, urging them forward. And then there was nothing but darkness. The ship's crew had been thrown into the heart of something ancient, something beyond their understanding. And as the vortex closed in on them, they realized that they were about to face something far greater than any enemy they had ever known. The galaxy was about to change. Forever. The darkness that enveloped the crew was like nothing they had ever experienced. There was no sound, no sensation of gravity or motion, just an all-consuming emptiness. For what felt like an eternity, there was only silence. The crew's minds raced, filled with fear, confusion, and the overwhelming question, what had they just unleashed? But then, slowly, the void began to stir. A faint light flickered in the distance, growing stronger with each passing moment. The crew, still in disbelief, felt the gravitational pull of the vortex's force weaken, allowing them to regain their footing. As the light intensified, it revealed a shape, a massive structure, unlike anything the crew had ever seen. It was not of metal, stone, or any material they knew. It was something alive. The walls shimmered and pulsed with an otherworldly glow, as if the very space around them was alive. There was no doubt now, whatever this place was, it was ancient, far beyond the reach of any known civilization in the galaxy. The crew of the Resolute stood at the threshold of an enigma that defied their understanding of the universe. "Where are we?" Lieutenant Vance asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His eyes scanned the scene, unable to comprehend the magnitude of the moment. I don't know," Greaves replied, her voice thick with awe. "But we're not where we were. This place, it's not part of any known star system. It's beyond anything the galaxy can understand." The rest of the crew stood motionless, gazing at the unfamiliar expanse that stretched before them. The chamber they stood in was immense, and in the center, at the heart of it all, was something even more mind-bending. An enormous stone tablet, covered in intricate alien runes. The air hummed with an energy that was both unsettling and mesmerizing. It felt as though the entire structure was waiting for something or someone. Greaves stepped forward cautiously, drawn by an invisible force, her hand reaching out towards the tablet. As her fingers brushed against the stone, a surge of energy shot through her, causing her to stumble backward. The air seemed to ripple around her, and a voice, deep and resonant, echoed inside her mind. "You are the ones." Greaves gasped. "Did you hear that?" she asked the crew, her voice trembling. They all nodded, but no one dared to speak. The voice had come from nowhere, directly inside their minds. It was clear, commanding, and it felt ancient, as though it had been waiting for millennia to be heard. "You are the ones who answered the call," the voice continued. "You are the ones who have awoken the Ancient Ones." The crew exchanged bewildered glances. The Ancient Ones, what could that possibly mean? Before anyone could speak, the tablet began to glow with a fierce intensity. The runes on its surface shifted and morphed, rearranging themselves into a pattern that seemed almost familiar, yet completely alien. The light grew blinding, and for a moment, it seemed as if the entire chamber was folding in on itself. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light died down, leaving only the tablet and its eerie glow. The crew stood in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. "What was that?" Lieutenant Vance finally asked, his voice unsteady. "Is this some kind of trap? Some alien test?" Greaves shook her head. "I don't think so. This is something bigger. We're at the center of something much older than the galaxy itself." At that moment, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. Slowly, the walls of the structure began to shift, and the crew felt the first real sign of life since they had entered the mysterious place. The chamber seemed to expand, revealing more hidden corridors, more secrets that had been buried for ages. Then, as the trembling subsided, the voice spoke again, But this time it was not within their minds. It came from the walls themselves, from the very air around them. The galaxy is on the brink, and you, the ones from Earth, are the key. Greaves felt a chill run down her spine. The key to what? She whispered aloud. The key to survival. The key to the galaxy's future, the voice answered, its tone final, unyielding. The universe has been waiting for you, and now you must choose. With those final words, the entire chamber went silent. The crew was left alone with the weight of the choice that lay before them, a choice that would determine the future of the galaxy itself. In the distance, beyond the walls, the faint sound of engines could be heard. Another fleet, another set of forces approaching. But this time, it wasn't just any fleet. It was the fleet of the Zakiri, the most feared warriors in the galaxy, and they had followed the same call. Greaves turned to her crew. Her voice was steady now, though her heart raced. We may be outnumbered, but we have something they don't. Something no one could ever have expected. Humanity. As the distant fleet of the Zakiri grew ever closer, the crew of the Resolute stood united, ready to face whatever would come next. They had answered the call, and now it was time to prove that humanity's response could indeed change the fate of the galaxy. The battle for the galaxy was about to begin, and with it, humanity's place among the stars would be forever cemented.